Welcome to the Money Tree Real Estate Investor Podcast, where we learn from real estate professionals across the industry. They will share about how they got into real estate, the big wins they have celebrated, the mistakes they have made along the way, and the advice they have for anyone following in their footsteps. Money really does grow on trees. Recording live from the Best Ever Conference in Salt Lake City, Utah, this is your host, William Holland, on the Money Tree Real Estate Investor Podcast. Today I've got a special guest, David Wallace.
How are you?
I'm doing good. So I know you're the CEO of Dunder Mifflin.
Listen, I am not the CEO of Dunder Mifflin. I am the CFO of Dunder Mifflin. Sounds like you just gave me a raise or something like that.
Hey, that's awesome. Yes, sir. So I know you're a Christian. We have that in common. Where are you from?
I live in Houston right now, but I'm from a lot of different areas. You name a city, I probably have lived there.
That's awesome. I know we talked about it before, but I used to live in Houston for 7 months.
Well, when you left, everyone started crying. I want you to know that.
That's awesome. So where'd you go to college, David?
Well, I went to 3 different colleges. First of all, when I was growing up, my dad worked for General Electric for 40 years. And so about every year and a half, we would move. That was their management training program. So by the time I graduated from college, I had lived in 17 different cities. I went to 3 high schools, 3 colleges. My first college was upstate New York at Union College. Started majoring in mechanical engineering, and between physics, mechanics, fluids, calculus, I figured there was an easier way to graduate. Went to the University of North Texas, got a degree in real estate finance, and then I went to the University of Reading in Reading, England, and basically studied international law and international finance. And a lot of people say, oh, it sounds cool to go to England. I learned how to drink warm beer. Okay, that's the extent of it.
That's cool, yeah. So I studied mechanical engineering as well. If I didn't have really good friends, I definitely wouldn't have made it myself, but I ended up graduating from Texas A&M with that degree.
Oh, well, I need to get down on one knee and kind of genuflect here. I've got a lot of confidence in you. I'm impressed.
Yes, sir. So when you were in England, I know you had a pretty unique experience. You got to work with Margaret Thatcher. So for those of you who don't know, little history lesson, Margaret Thatcher was the prime minister for a while in England. So what were you doing for her?
So actually, when I went to school there, I had not met Lady Thatcher. But after I graduated from college, I used to play polo in Dallas. And so at a polo match, I met her son, Mark Thatcher. And so we started doing business together on a social basis. We formed a company called the Grantham Company. Grantham, England is where Lady Thatcher was a member of Parliament before she became Prime Minister. And we basically invested Thatcher money from the family office as well as other co-investors. And so I was the CEO of that, and it was fascinating. I loved every minute of it. But the really fun part was when she stepped down from being Prime Minister. And that was when I became her chief of staff. I ran her private office, negotiated literary rights, speaking engagements, things like that. I was the founding treasurer of the Margaret Thatcher Foundation. But the thing that I think is really relevant to what I do today is that I was involved in about $27 billion of privatization that took place. And Lady Thatcher privatized everything: British Gas, British Coal, British Telecom, British Rail, British fill in the blank. And what that did, and if you stop and think about it, a lot of times people don't understand privatization. So the government owned all of those assets. No different than a government here owns a bus line. And they basically said, we are going to do an IPO of that. So now the public owns all of those assets and those operations, but the beneficiary of that IPO and the public offering was the federal government. So they took all of that cash and paid off debt. So when Lady Thatcher left office, there was 0 debt. So you can imagine what that would be like here in the United States if we did something like that. But when she left, there was 0 debt. But that taught me at a really young age how the public and private sector can work well together, how it can be good fiscal policy and really good monetary policy as well for a government. Fast forward, I became the mayor. I ran for initially city council and then mayor for the city of Sugar Land, which is in southwest Houston. Or actually, let me rephrase that. Houston is a small, tiny suburb of Sugar Land to the northeast. So, but in any event, I basically took the approach of, I want to privatize anything we can. I want to reach out. If there is a public sector company that can do this job quicker, faster, cheaper, better than us, let's outsource. So we as a city started a pretty aggressive program on privatizing and outsourcing water, wastewater, solid waste disposal, tax collection, traffic management, all of those different programs. And sitting here today, the city of Sugar Land has the second lowest tax rate in the state of Texas in their peer group. That's not a coincidence. It is anytime you can use private sector capital, ingenuity, economies of scale, good things happen. And when you drop your taxes, and I'm a very much supply side oriented guy, when you drop taxes, it puts more money in people's pockets. They spend it, they invest it, and it grows the economy.
It's captured.
That's it.
Exactly.
That's exactly right.
So I do have a question for you before we move on into what you're doing now.
Yeah.
So how old were you when you started helping the Thatcher family, and what kind of pressure did that feel like?
Let's just say I was in my 20s when I did that, and it was interesting. So on the surface, it was probably one of the coolest things, and that's probably a word my daughters would use, but it was one of the coolest things that I had done. The people that I met, the things that I saw were fantastic. But I don't mind telling you, there were times where I would go into a meeting and you would have people that would kind of look down their nose at you and come up with phrases like bugger off or things like that. I could come up with a lot of other phrases. But as time went by, I think people looked at it as, all right, well, this guy knows what he's talking about. And they knew that I had the Thatcher family's best interest at heart in anything that we did. And from an experience standpoint, when you go into a project, you expect good things to happen. And that project may be real estate. That project may be an operating company where you buy an investment. And you go into it and say, well, I'm going to double my money. That's good. When you do that, that's what I expected. When you don't do it, when problems occur, that's when you really learn a lot. And so as I started looking at things, when I was first involved in real estate back in '82, real estate was going through the roof. And I thought I was this flat-bellied stud. I could do no wrong. Mm-hmm. I would buy at $1, I would sell at $1.50 until the mid-'80s, the '86 Tax Act, compliments of President Reagan, the savings and loan crisis, the resolution trust, and it put me into a workout situation. But I learned so much by way of debtors' rights, creditors' rights, the bankruptcy code, restructuring, and it really laid the foundation for what I would do, which was basically go in and buy troubled companies, insolvent companies, companies that were in bankruptcy, buy them out of bankruptcy, sometimes buy them in the morning, put them in a chapter proceeding that afternoon, not with a view of hurting creditors, but with a view of filing a consensual plan, bringing it out of bankruptcy, saving jobs, and saving the creditors that were there. And so I literally have been involved in over 35 bankruptcies, wow. Companies that I've acquired. And it's waters that I like fishing in. I like a troubled asset. And I think people started realizing, all right, this guy understands that. And so people started giving me the benefit of the doubt. And the rest basically is how everything unfolded.
Right. I've heard it said that people will laugh until they don't anymore.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And a lot of times people don't know what they don't know. And, so when you go into something, you think you know everything until the crisis occurs.
Absolutely. Yes, sir. So, you took us through your mayorship, and then I know you branched off into real estate as well, developing real estate and those types of things. So can you tell us a little bit more about your journey in real estate and where you are now?
Sure. Like I said, when I first got out of school, I went to work for a real estate syndication company back in Dallas. And as a syndicator, we basically would find mostly multifamily, but we had some office, some other like hospitality, hotels, asset classes. And so we would go out, we would invest our own money at this company, and then we would raise capital from other investors. And at that point in time, many of the syndications were tax driven. So if I invest $1 here today, that means I can write off $2 on my tax return. So if I'm in the 50% tax bracket, I'm basically zero net investment on an after-tax basis in this investment. And so that's the way that things were done at that point in time. That was the only time that I ever really worked for somebody. And when I formed the Grantham Company, that was a 50-50 partnership with myself and the Thatchers. And at that point, I was always on my own. And so I've been on my own since the mid-'80s. And quite honestly, when you're on your own, And this is so funny. A lot of times people say, I hate working for the guy down the hall. I hate having to clock in for a paycheck. I just want to be my own boss. I want to get out there and just do my own thing. And so a lot of times people think that is a privilege and that you don't have a boss anymore. But what you've done is you've transferred it from a boss that you're a subordinate of at your work to you are now a boss or a subordinate to the IRS. You're now a subordinate to your banker, to your investors, to your customers, to your employees that you're having to give paychecks to every day. So having your own business isn't always a wonderful experience, but nevertheless, that's just what I've done ever since the mid-'80s. And quite honestly, I love every minute of it. And to the extent that I've had failures in my life, and I have, you learn from those. To the extent that I've made successes in my life, I try to give credit to all the people that were around me in connection with those successes. But you have to just learn from those mistakes. And when you sit down with investors, and investors say, well, I did research on you, and I see that this property just did not perform as anticipated. I've been involved in over 100 companies. When you do that, not everyone is going to go as expected. And when you typically deal with early stage startup companies, your chance of failure is even greater. So as long as you learn from that, and quite honestly, if I'm going to bring in an investor, a consultant with me, I don't want somebody that is prim and proper. They just got out of the Wharton School and they got their MBA. I want somebody that their nose is broken. You can see the scars on their face. They know what is lurking around that corner. And that corner may very well be an economy. That corner may be market. That corner may be interest rates, but they've experienced before. And if they learn from their mistakes, then hopefully they're the ones that are going to help protect me so I don't make those mistakes as I continue to move forward.
Absolutely. And I'm in real estate syndication as well, so I quit my job about a month ago. I do have an employee, and this morning, instead of coming to the conference, I ended up actually just lining out the rest of his week. And,
oh, really?
Spending time just catching up on stuff like that. But it is a big responsibility, accepting money from other people. And, ultimately we are trying to help them, but things can go wrong.
No, you're exactly right. And, when you take other people's money, the fiduciary responsibility that comes with other people's money is pretty significant. And it's interesting, and especially when you deal with bankrupt businesses and you start looking at the interpretation of the law of fiduciary responsibility. I mean, it truly is, I'm going to fall on the sword for my investors. And that's what you have to do. If it's your last breathing breath, you have to do that for your investor. And that's what is expected of somebody when you're taking other people's money.
Absolutely. So I know you've got a big project that you're working on right now. Can you share a little bit more about what you've got going on and why you chose to kind of go in that direction?
I will. So from I love public-private partnerships. And part of this was the education that I had when I was with Lady Thatcher. It was the education that I experienced when I was mayor. And understanding kind of where money is buried on a federal, state, and local level. Understanding what you can and cannot do when you're trying to do an economic development project in a city. Understanding how you can structure those type of transactions. So I literally have done about $6 billion. When I say I've done, some I've done as a principal, some I've done as a consultant, where I've been working with people on a public-private partnership. So I've done about $6 billion. Half of that was as a private developer or a private consultant. The other half of that was on the other side of the dais as a mayor and helping to put those types of transactions together. Working with a private developer, okay, here's how we can create a tax increment reinvestment zone. Here's how we can create a public improvement district, a municipal utility district, a levy improvement district. All of these acronyms that are quasi-governmental agencies that have the ability to use capital and to invest that capital. And when I say invest, most of the time it's in the form of a grant that has to be used for certain purposes. So I understand that. And so I love public-private partnerships. And so a friend of mine a gentleman by the name of Mike Van Huss. He has a company called Park Harbor Capital out of Dallas. He was involved in the acquisition, creating all the public-private partnership tools, and negotiating the transaction for Collin Creek Mall in Plano, Texas. A very successful mall in its heyday, but on about 100 acres, right on Central Expressway in Dallas. So he was responsible for that. The broker that brought him that deal is the same broker that brought him what's referred to as the Tri-County Mall in Springdale, Ohio. Springdale is a suburb of the city of Cincinnati. And so he was asked to take a look at that. He went to Cincinnati, looked at it, came back and he called me and said, Dave, I think this is a really unique public-private partnership opportunity. Would you mind working with me on this? Let's go up to Cincinnati. So I went there my very first time in October of 2021. I'd never been to Cincinnati before. Met with the city, met with the leadership there, a number of others. But what we basically saw was, if you want to buy good real estate, find a defunct mall. Because malls are really at Main and Main. It's all the high traffic areas. It's the areas that where big retailers wanted to go when retail was the thing. And unfortunately, whether it was COVID, whether it was the effects of Amazon, people's spending habits, wanting to just sit at their computer to shop, not going to a mall, going to a lifestyle center mall instead of an enclosed mall, all of those factors have made it so that there's over 700 malls in America today that have problems. And when I say problems, it may be that there's still positive cash flow, but Macy's has shut down, Sears, Dillard's, JCPenney's, they've all shut down. And what that does, it triggers a number of things in reciprocal easement agreements in a mall. And in many cases, it enables the inline tenants to terminate their lease.
Wow.
Because they signed a lease that says, I'm here because of Macy's, JCPenney's, Dillard's, and if they go away, I can go away. And so this mall, when we bought it, was at 18% occupancy. All of those big boxes that I just mentioned, Sears, Dillard's, Macy's, JCPenney's, all shut down. However, we have 230,000 cars a day right next to us, adjacent. We have 75 acres of developable land in the city of Springdale. And so from the city leadership, they had a mall that was generating all of this foot traffic, sales tax, job creation, property tax, that literally vanished. It was at 98% occupancy 10 years ago, 18% now. So we bought it, worked with the city, and the city basically said, we want to reverse the trajectory of this. Because think about it, when you have a situation where you have a mall, because of all that foot traffic, Costco comes, Target comes, all of these big boxes come. The antithesis of that is when all of that foot traffic goes away, so do those big boxes.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened in Springdale. So we negotiated with the city. We're working with federal, state, and local programs to come up with capital. Out of 2.7 million square feet of steel and concrete that is there today, we're basically repurposing, reusing over 2 million square feet of that. So if you think about it from a sustainability standpoint, we're not going to be putting all that steel and concrete and asbestos and all of that in the landfills in Ohio. We're repurposing it. From an economic standpoint, it is phenomenal to us. There is so much found equity on this project. 2 parking garages, 1 4 floors, 1 2 floors, about 4,000 spaces.
It's a lot.
To a mall that's at 18% occupancy, that is worth zero. And consequently, when we bought the mall, we paid zero for those parking structures. To replace those today is about $80 million.
Millions.
And we're entitled for 2,600 multifamily units. We're entitled for 400 hotel units, 500,000 square feet of entertainment, retail, about 650,000 square feet of office. All of these different type of entitlements. And so as we are moving forward, we are now at a point where we're about to submit our demo and abatement plans to the city. We'll be in a position that we'll probably start the demo and abatement in the June timeframe. Within 3 months, we'll be submitting for our site and civil plans and for those permits. And then within about 6 months after that, we will be at a point where we literally can start doing vertical construction. And I know that sounds silly, because think of like a single family lot developer. It takes you 18 months to put your street, sewer, water, sidewalks, infrastructure in to get your pad sites so that you can sell them to the Lennars and D.R. Hortons of the world. And in this situation, because some of our demo is, all right, well, we have Dillard's. Let's strip the exterior off. Let's core down in the middle so we can turn it into a donut hole, and we can turn that into multifamily. Same thing with Macy's. Same thing with the mall, where we're basically separating Macy's from the mall. And at this point, all of our vertical construction in phase 1, we have 100% of our pad sites, 100% of our users pre-selected. We've already signed agreements with them. And so we know exactly who we're going to be selling all of these pad sites to. And so it's the gift that keeps on giving, because as we sell those pad sites, we're basically keeping 50% of the equity ownership of every single vertical asset. And somebody else is bringing the debt, somebody else is bringing the 50% of the equity, and it's at a point where we don't have to use our resources, our personnel, our team. We have somebody else, and these are well-heeled co-development partners that we have. And so even though we're going to make money on the phase 1, the horizontal, it gives us the ability of continuing to be an equity partner on everything else that we do. So that's what we're doing there.
Yeah, that's so exciting. That's such a brilliant structure as well.
Well, I appreciate that. You can probably tell I'm excited about it, because I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely, yes, sir. And I know we talked about it a little bit before, but my construction background is building a 26-story core and shell office building in Dallas, Texas. And then all of last year I worked in estimating. And so I was on 14 projects from mixed-use developments to multifamily apartments to office buildings, totaling over $2 billion. So one of those buildings is the new regional headquarters for Goldman Sachs.
I did not know that. I did not know that you worked on that. See, everyone's got their strengths, and everyone has their weaknesses. I'm a finance guy. I'm a public-private partnership guy. I do not know which end of a hammer to hold. So I am not your construction guy, which is why this gentleman, Mike Van Huss, that's basically what he does. He focuses on all of that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's how you build a team, is you figure out what your strengths are and you figure out what your weaknesses are, and you mitigate all of those.
That's exactly right.
Passive investors in real estate are able to receive a check every month. Some people call that mailbox money. We say money really does grow on trees. Visit the website at biggerpictureholdings.com, where we have a ton of free resources to help you learn more about planting your very own money tree.
Absolutely. Well, I know we have just a few more minutes left, but to wrap things up, what are some of the lessons that you've learned in real estate and development, and even in government, that you could offer to the listeners? And then finally, I'd like to end on a strong note of what's your proudest accomplishments in real estate and even in life.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. So some of the lessons learned, I mentioned before, you don't know what you don't know. And I made that comment when I was younger, when I first got out of school. I was this flat-bellied stud, and I would sit there and I would look at these people that were 50 years old, 60 years old, and thinking, come on, you're too slow. You don't know what you're talking about. I just got out of school. I got this degree, and I know what I'm doing, and I can do it faster, and I'm going to get up at 3 o'clock every morning. And like I said, what you don't know, you don't know. And so even though you may have knowledge, and it may be pretty good cerebral knowledge, always listen. And there's always people that are out there that are much better than you. And surround yourself with those people, because those are the people that are going to keep you out of the potholes as you're walking through life. And so those were things that I found pretty early in my career. I also found pretty early in my career, hire slow and fire fast. And that comes to partners as well. And so there have been partners that I've had that I thought, all right, I made the comment before, as a fiduciary, until my very last breath. But there are partners that I've had that basically say, I'm out of here. I'm ready to run for the hills. I can't stand the heat in the kitchen. And so as you're picking your partners, and that may be a partner from an investor, that may be a partner in life. That may be a partner in a business that you're moving into, is always be in a position that you do as much research as you can. And believe me, everybody's got blemishes in their past. Sit down and talk about them. When I've had problems in the past, and people have said, I want to do business with you, but there's one thing I want to talk to you about. I read this about you online. I read this. I love it when people ask that question, because it gives me an opportunity to say, sure, I was a mayor. I was the chief of staff for Margaret Thatcher. I was a city council member. I was an easy target. I mean, can you imagine running against me for mayor? Ladies and gentlemen, do you want to hire this guy as your mayor? Did you know he's been involved in 35 bankruptcies? He's going to bankrupt our city. I could have said the same thing to my opponent. Do you really want to hire this guy? Did you know he's been involved in over 400 lawsuits? Well, if he's a lawyer, he's a litigator, he's going to be involved in lawsuits. Mm-hmm. And everything I said was factual, and everything he said was factual, but I'm an easy target because I do turnarounds and have done that in the past. So in any event, I love it when people say, I want to talk to you about that. I want to gather as much information as I can. And as I mentioned, I want to make sure that I've got partners that have made mistakes, that have had failures, because that's the only way that they're going to learn. Now, when you start talking about accomplishments, and there's a number of different accomplishments. Let's talk, first of all, from a personal standpoint. About in 2000, and this was before I ran for council and public service, I actually drowned. I was found at the bottom of a swimming pool. And at that point in time, I went into cardiac arrest. The paramedics, when they tried to look at the timeline, I basically was taken off in an ambulance, then life-flighted. I was in a coma. It was just a bad experience. And so I was very active in my church, St. Lawrence Catholic Church in the city of Sugar Land, and I owe my life to that church. And I know that sounds a little flamboyant, but what I mean is that I was very active in the church. I sang in the choir. I chaired the capital campaign. I was on the finance council, and I was very visible in the church. And about a week prior to my drowning, the Ladies Guild started this prayer chain, where I call one person to pray for you, and you call two people. And the only reason, and the medical community cannot explain why I lived, or don't have brain damage or anything else, but I attribute it to the power of prayer. So I consider that to be a very impactful part of my life. Marriage, children, other things that obviously are extremely important. From a political standpoint, I would say that there's a lot of people that, while I was mayor, we developed Sugar Land Town Square. We brought the Sugar Land Skeeters, which are now a minor league feeder into the Houston Astros. We brought in a 7,000-seat performance hall. All of these different things. A lot of people say, well, is that your finest moment? Is that what you like? The Mayor's Youth Advisory Council putting together an internet safety program that was rolled out to 1,300 cities across America. Those were not what I consider to be my finest piece. The Anti-Defamation League has a community of respect. And most of the time, it's a school of respect at a elementary, high school. We were the first city to have the community of respect because I was worried. We were a very diverse community. I was worried about all the wars and political strains across the world. And as we were bringing people into our community, I wanted them to feel welcome. I didn't want them to feel stiff-armed. So we had multicultural exchanges, pulpit exchanges, where we would have a rabbi that would go into a Muslim a mosque, and we'd have a cleric going into a Catholic church and explaining. And I believe what it did was it really helped our community to become that welcoming community to everybody. Didn't matter what their faith, what their religion, what their background, their creed, ethnicity, anything. We were the first community in America to have the community of respect from the Anti-Defamation League, that I consider to be my greatest accomplishment.
That's really cool, and I think that embodies the faith in Jesus and the lifestyle that he lived. Change starts with conversations,
right?
And building relationships, and I think that's really cool. So thank you so much for being a guest on the show today.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It's been wonderful.
Like and subscribe below. A new episode will air every Tuesday at 7 a.m. Are you looking for more content? Visit our website, biggerpictureholdings.com. And remember, money really does grow on trees.